A weapon so far ahead of its time that Allied soldiers who first saw it thought it came from another planet. The Sturmgewehr 44, or STG-44, was the world's first true assault rifle, a weapon that would shape every battlefield that came after it. But behind its innovation was something darker. Because this wasn't just a story of German engineering. It was a story of desperation, deception, and the human cost of invention. The STG-44 didn't just change how wars were fought, it revealed how far a nation would go to survive. By 1942, Germany was bleeding. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army was pushing back with overwhelming numbers. German soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles, the old Kar-98 KS, were being outgunned in close combat by Soviet troops wielding submachine guns like the PPSH-41. The Wehrmacht needed something new, something fast, compact, and deadly. A weapon that could fire like a machine gun but remain light enough to carry into the trenches and forests of the Eastern Front. That dream led to an idea that would redefine modern warfare. A select-fire rifle capable of both semi-automatic and fully automatic fire, chambered for an intermediate cartridge that balanced power with control. The world's first assault rifle. The concept wasn't born overnight. German engineers at Henkel and Walther had been experimenting since 1938 with prototypes that bridged the gap between rifles and submachine guns. They called it the Maschinen Karabiner 42, or MKB-42. It fired a brand new cartridge, the 7.92 by 33mm Kurz, a short version of the standard Mauser rifle round. It didn't kick as hard, allowing soldiers to stay on target even while firing bursts. Suddenly, the idea of one man holding the power of a machine gun didn't seem so impossible. But there was a problem, one that almost killed the project before it began. Adolf Hitler himself. Hitler didn't like new rifles. He was obsessed with heavy weapons, tanks, and massive firepower, not with experimental projects. When the army first proposed mass-producing the MKB-42, Hitler personally rejected it. But the engineers refused to give up, so they changed the name. They called it a machine pistol, a misleading title that disguised its true purpose. Production continued in secret, and soon thousands of the weapons reached the front lines under the radar. German soldiers immediately saw its potential. It could fire single shots at range or unleash bursts in close combat. It was lighter than a rifle, steadier than a submachine gun, and deadlier than both. In 1943, reports flooded back from the Eastern Front. This weapon gives our infantry new life. With this, one man can stop a Soviet charge. Hitler eventually found out. But instead of shutting it down, he renamed it. He gave it a title meant to inspire his exhausted army. Sturmgewehr 44, meaning storm rifle. It was no longer just a gun. It was propaganda, a promise of vengeance and rebirth. On the battlefield, the STG-44 was unlike anything the world had seen. It fired faster than a bolt action, farther than a submachine gun, and with accuracy that shocked both allies and enemies. Its 30-round curved magazine, pistol grip, and short barrel design became the blueprint for the modern assault rifle, the ancestor of the AK-47, M16, and every military rifle that followed. The STG-44 arrived too late to save Germany. By 1944, the Reich was collapsing. Factories were in ruins, fuel was scarce, and most of the men using this advanced weapon were not elite troops. They were exhausted, half-starved, and fighting for survival. The weapon that symbolized German innovation was born out of chaos. Each STG-44 required complex parts and materials the country could barely afford. Factories were bombed, supply lines shattered. Some rifles were assembled by forced laborers in underground facilities, men and women working under brutal conditions, building a gun that would be used against their own nations. It was the dark paradox of the war machine, the idea that genius and cruelty could coexist under the same roof. And for every soldier who marveled at its power, there was another who saw it as a sign of the end, a brilliant weapon made for a dying army. Soldiers who used the STG-44 described it as both a blessing and a curse. It gave them confidence in battle, but it also made them targets. Soviet snipers learned to spot the weapon and prioritize shooting anyone carrying one, knowing they were the most dangerous men on the field. The gun jammed in mud and cold, but when it worked, it was devastating. A burst from its short cartridge could tear through enemy ranks with terrifying precision. Yet the men who carried it were often too few, too late. Germany couldn't produce enough ammunition to keep it in widespread use. Only around 425,000 were ever made, a fraction of what the war demanded. Compared to the millions of rifles in Allied hands, the STG-44 was a whisper, a glimpse of what could have been had it come sooner. In Hitler's speeches, the STG-44 became a symbol of hope. He promised it would turn the tide, arm every soldier and push back the Allies. Newsreels showed soldiers charging through forests, rifles flashing, the voiceover calling it the miracle weapon. But behind the cameras, everyone knew the truth. The Reich was running out of time. The miracle couldn't stop the bombers, the tanks, or the Red Army's advance. Even as Hitler showed off the rifle to generals, entire divisions were being surrounded in the east. The STG-44 couldn't change strategy. It could only change how men died fighting. By the winter of 1944, the STG-44 had become a legend among soldiers, both admired and feared. It was the weapon of a new age, born from the ashes of an empire collapsing under its own ambition. But the true legacy of the STG-44 didn't end with Germany's defeat. When Germany finally fell in 1945, the STG-44 should have disappeared with it. Factories were destroyed, soldiers surrendered, and the Reich that had built it was gone. But the weapon didn't vanish. Thousands of STG-44s were captured by the Allies and the Soviets, entire stockpiles hidden in bunkers and abandoned trains. What began as Hitler's miracle weapon became a trophy of the victors. And soon the world realized, the war might be over, but the STG-44 had already changed everything. The rifle was studied by engineers from every major army. The British examined its ergonomics, the Americans its cartridge. But the Soviets looked deeper. Among them was a young tank commander and designer, Mikhail Kalashnikov. He studied captured German weapons in the years after the war, searching for a way to arm Soviet troops with something simple, reliable, and deadly. And from that study came the AK-47. Its gas system, curved magazine, and intermediate cartridge all echoed the STG-44. Kalashnikov later denied direct copying, but the similarities were undeniable. The DNA of the STG-44 lived inside the rifle that would go on to define the Cold War. The weapon that began in Hitler's Germany became the foundation of the Soviet Union's military power. The story didn't stop there. Captured STG-44s were handed out to militias, resistance groups, and puppet armies across Eastern Europe. They appeared in the hands of East German border guards, Yugoslav partisans, and even Middle Eastern fighters decades later. In 2012, weapons inspectors in Syria found crates of them still in use, rusted, battered, but firing. A relic of the Second World War being used in a 21st century conflict. Few weapons in history have lasted that long. Fewer still carried such a legacy. Technically, the STG-44 was a marvel. Its gas-operated system reduced recoil, allowing controlled bursts. Its 7.92 by 33 mm round balanced range and power perfectly, a revolutionary concept at the time. It was modular, easy to reload, and lethal at both close and medium range. But it was also fragile, expensive, and unsuited to mass production during Germany's collapse. In many ways, it was a weapon born 20 years too early, an idea too advanced for the dying regime that made it. For the soldiers who carried it, the STG-44 was more than a tool, it was power in their hands. It gave exhausted infantrymen the ability to fight back against overwhelming odds. It made them feel like they could hold the line a little longer. But it also blurred the line between defense and destruction. Suddenly, one man could unleash the firepower of a squad. And from that moment on, war would never look the same again. The STG-44 didn't just change combat, it changed how soldiers thought about it. After the war, the weapon's design spread quietly through the decades. The AK-47 became its spiritual heir. The American M16 decades later refined its ideas. And nearly every modern assault rifle, from the G36 to the FN SCAR, still carries the same fundamental blueprint. Today, collectors and historians often call the STG-44 a masterpiece. But that word hides its true story. It wasn't built in triumph, it was built in fear. The STG-44 changed how nations fought, but it also left behind a question. Can technology be separated from the hands that create it? It was designed under a dictatorship, built through suffering, and used in a war that cost tens of millions of lives. Yet its ideas became the foundation for nearly every rifle that followed. Innovation doesn't choose sides, only people do. And that's what makes its legacy so haunting. When the last shots of World War II faded, the world entered a new kind of war, one fought in jungles, deserts, and city streets. And in every conflict that followed, you could trace its shape. The curved magazine, the compact frame, the philosophy of mobility and firepower. All of it, born from one weapon forged in desperation. The STG-44 was the first of its kind. And though the Reich that made it lies in ashes, its shadow stretches across history, into every battlefield where men still fight with rifles built on its design. The dark truth is this. Sometimes the most influential weapons aren't the ones that win wars. They're the ones that outlive them.